loneliness.
The heaviest thing about being lonely is that it's not like being bored. You can't pop in a video game and stop being lonely. It's not like being mad. You can't bring up the latest Mr. Beast video and stop being lonely. It isn't even like feeling, for example, frumpy, where you can just pull up your favorite Megan Thee Stallion video and stop feeling frumpy. You can't even count on being around other people to stop you from being lonely, because probably there is no feeling of loneliness more intense than being around other people and knowing that you don't belong.
Of loneliness, PsychologyToday.com says, quote, "A number of unfavorable outcomes have been linked to loneliness, in addition to its association with depressive symptoms and other forms of mental illness. Loneliness is a risk factor for heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and arthritis, among other diseases. Lonely people are twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's disease," research suggests. The state of chronic loneliness may trigger adverse physiological responses such as the increased production of stress hormones, hinder sleep, and result in weakened immunity, end quote. And that may be as good a segue into Edgar Allan Poe as any I could hope for.
Edgar Allan Poe was born to something of an enchanted family. Both his father, David Poe Jr., and his mother, Eliza, were actors. And in a house of artists, Poe would spend his entire childhood. Or until he was about 1 year old when his father ran away, and is expected to have died about a year later. Still, he had Eliza, his mother, who was something of an acting prodigy. She wouldn't die until a month and a day before Edgar Allan Poe's second birthday. So it's understandable that Edgar Allan Poe had some hang-ups about abandonment.
Poe's biography introduced, we'll turn again to the curmudgeonly critic-in-chief, Harold Bloom, to introduce the presentation of Poe's poetry. In The Best Poems of the English Language from Chaucer through Robert Frost, Bloom divulges, quote, "Poe is a bad poet, a poor critic, and a dreadful prose stylist in his celebrated tales. Poe is also inescapable. No other American writer, Whitman, Emerson, Mark Twain, Henry James, Faulkner, is so widely read both domestically and abroad. In translation, Poe improves greatly, as French and German versions demonstrate. He dreamed universal nightmares and still frightens children. The late actor Vincent Price was Poe's true celebratant. Only outrageous overplaying works with Poe."
Just by the by, both the aforementioned Vincent Price and Mark Twain were good old Missouri boys. So, Mr. Bloom, not a Missouri boy. Camp challenge accepted.
Alone. From childhood's hour I have not been as others were. I have not seen as others saw. I could not bring my passions from a common spring. From the same source I have not taken my sorrow. I could not awaken my heart to joy at the same tone. And all I loved alone. Then, in my childhood, in the dawn of a most stormy life, was drawn from every depth of good and ill the mystery which binds me still. From the torrent or the fountain, from the red cliff of the mountain, from the sun that round me rolled in its autumn tint of gold, from the lightning in the sky as it passed me flying by, from the thunder and the storm, and the cloud that took the form, when the rest of heaven was blue, of a demon in my view.
Poe wrote this poem at just 20 years old. Still, he had already lost both of his parents, become estranged from his foster parents, dropped out of college, and maybe lost a former fiancée to another man. Now, I'm normally fairly um, opposed to biographical criticism in general, but the reason I'm really opposed to biographical criticism in general is that sort of trying to decode the literature to understand why it was written doesn't make that literature any more valuable to you as the reader. Why or why not Edgar Allan Poe would have written something doesn't make it more valuable to me, doesn't help me in my daily life anymore. And I believe that is what literature is for. Literature is to help us with our own daily lives as opposed to walking around with someone else's words in our heads just to have them there. But in light of the sneering which is usually levied at Edgar Allan Poe, as we saw there from Harold Bloom, I think, as I had voiced earlier in the words of Harold Bloom, I thought it might prompt a bit of discussion here. That sort of snooty dismissive attitude toward Edgar Allan Poe. And I want to start by sort of looking at these things and going through a little bit of universality to them, despite what we know about Poe's biography, or maybe in light of what we know about Poe's biography in this first 4 lines here. From childhood's hour I have not been as others were, I have not seen as others saw, I could not bring my passions from a common spring. Surely there is some sense of otherness pervasive to the human experience writ large. It is alive and violent in all of us. Maybe it takes an otherness as pervasive as Poe's sense of otherness, his own feelings of otherness. He felt those so strongly that he, and maybe only he, uniquely he, can give them an ample voicing. Now, from the same source I have not taken, my sorrow I could not awaken my heart to joy at the same tone, and all I loved alone. Even our speaker's passions, his likes and interests, and most importantly, loves, were solitary affairs. But who hasn't felt that way from time to time? And that's the true brilliance of literature. If you're willing to open yourself up to the words, you can't find you if you can't find a way to open yourself up if you can find a way to open yourself up to the words on the page, you will be able to find a message for you in every poem, story, or novel. It is our uniqueness, the ways that we are different, the things from which our passions spring, that bring us to the same place that this poem is sort of hosted in the general experience of what it means to be human. Then, in my childhood, in the dawn of a most stormy life, was drawn from every depth of good and ill the mystery which binds me still. Who isn't afraid of the monster they're becoming? Am I right? Who isn't afraid of the monster that they are becoming? And who, through their entire life, isn't slowly peeling back the layers of their childhood and figuring out that maybe they have a drinking problem, for example, because their father had a drinking problem, and by God, if drinking is what it means to be a man, then I can drink twice, 3 times, 4 times as much as you ever pretended to be able to drink. And look, maybe
maybe that's what this is all about. Maybe it is what this is all about. Not your father's drinking problem, but deep down, the ability to look at life as an other and really understand that though your stormy life was there from the beginning of your life, you can still be. Our speaker here is sort of levying the idea that no, I am alone. From the torrent or the fountain of the red cliff of the mountain, from the sun that round me rolled in its autumn tint of gold, no matter where our speaker is, he is alone. From the lightning in the sky as it passed me flying by, from the thunder and the storm and the cloud that took the form, when the rest of heaven was blue, of a demon in my view. Our speaker is saying that no matter where he is, no matter what is going on around him, there is, no matter how beautiful the day, a demon in my view. That demon of being alone. Now, are you alone because you are the other, or are you the other because you are alone? Which of these has mattered most towards our speaker being alone? Was he a monster? Was he someone who just did not have the tools of sociability? It doesn't seem to matter. It does not matter to our speaker, and it does not matter to those who are not there with him. But for me, it's this line here from whence the true darkness springs. And all I loved alone. And to get to the true darkness here, we have to ask this simple question: what is love? We can say that we love things. Sure, I love literature, I love football, I love monster trucks and big old tires. But really, the domain of love is reserved for those things which might love us back. Shakespeare said, "Love looks not with the eyes, but with the mind, and therefore is winged Cupid painted blind." It may seem trivial to include a line like "all I loved alone," but the true implication of this line is to say that I had no one. Even in my deepest emotion, the emotion of love, the thing for which we might sacrifice anything, I am alone. Even in the domain of this emotion which must be shared with something which would love us back, I loved alone. Everything that I loved alone. It did not love me back. And that is why I believe that this is really Edgar Allan Poe's darkest poem. Is this beard starting to make me look frumpy? I'm a savage. Classy, bougie, ratchet. Sassy, moody, nasty. Acting stupid, what's happening? Alone. From childhood's hour I have not been as others were. I have not seen as others saw. I could not bring my passions from a common spring. From the same source I have not taken my sorrow. I could not awaken my heart to joy at the same tone. And all I loved alone. Then, in my childhood, in the dawn of a most stormy life, was drawn from every depth of good and ill the mystery which binds me still. From the torrent or the fountain, From the red cliff of the mountain, from the sun that round me rolled in its autumn tint of gold, from the lightning in the sky as it passed me flying by, from the thunder and the storm, and the cloud that took the form, when the rest of heaven was blue, of a demon in my view.